The Sahara has always looked empty from above. An endless ocean of sand stretching beyond the horizon, hiding nothing but silence. But deserts have a strange habit of lying. Every grain beneath your feet could be covering the remains of a forgotten world, a forgotten king, or a forgotten nightmare. Now imagine standing in the middle of that endless wilderness as archaeologists carefully brush away centuries of dust, only to uncover a human body unlike anything ever found before. The mummy's limbs are positioned in an impossible way. Strange symbols surround it. Objects buried beside it belong to no known burial tradition. Even the experts, people who have spent their lives studying ancient civilizations, cannot immediately explain what they are looking at. The discovery raises a disturbing question. What if this mummy doesn't belong to the civilization we think it does? What if somewhere beneath the Sahara, an entire chapter of human history has remained hidden for thousands of years, waiting for someone to uncover it? For centuries, the Sahara Desert has been viewed as one of the harshest places on Earth. Temperatures soar beyond imagination during the day before plunging into freezing darkness at night. Dust storms erase footprints within minutes, and shifting dunes swallow entire landscapes as though they never existed. Looking across its endless sands today, it is difficult to imagine that this unforgiving wilderness was once completely different. Thousands of years ago, the Sahara was not a desert at all. It was alive. Vast rivers carved their way across green valleys. Giant lakes reflected the African sky. Herds of elephants, giraffes, antelope, and even crocodiles thrived across enormous grasslands. Human communities built settlements around fresh water, hunted wildlife, raised livestock, and left behind remarkable paintings on cave walls that still survive today. These ancient artists filled the stone with images of animals that no longer exist anywhere near the modern Sahara, preserving evidence of a forgotten paradise long before written history began. Then, something changed. Over thousands of years, Earth's climate slowly shifted. Rainfall became increasingly rare. Rivers dried into cracked scars across the landscape. Lakes disappeared beneath expanding dunes. Entire communities were forced to migrate toward the Nile Valley or disappear into history altogether. The once green Sahara transformed into the largest hot desert on the planet. But nature buried more than rivers. It buried memories. Every year, powerful winds move billions of tons of sand across North Africa. Ancient campsites vanish. Stone structures disappear beneath towering dunes. Burial grounds remain untouched for thousands of years, sealed away from sunlight and protected from the outside world. Unlike humid climates where time destroys almost everything, the dry desert can preserve remarkable secrets with astonishing detail. Sometimes, it preserves people. Natural mummification can occur when the environment removes moisture from the human body before bacteria have time to cause decomposition. Long before Egyptian embalmers perfected their famous techniques along the Nile, the desert itself had already mastered the art of preservation. Heat, dry air, mineral-rich soil, and complete isolation created conditions capable of protecting human remains for millennia. Yet every now and then, archaeologists discover a burial that refuses to fit familiar patterns. Not every mummy belongs to a pharaoh. Not every burial follows ancient Egyptian tradition. And not every discovery answers more questions than it creates. During a recent archaeological survey across a remote section of the Sahara, researchers investigating forgotten caravan routes noticed something unusual. Satellite imagery revealed subtle geometric formations beneath the sand. They were almost invisible from ground level, but from space they formed faint outlines that did not resemble natural rock formations. Curiosity led to excavation. At first, nothing seemed extraordinary. Human communities flourished across landscapes that today seem impossible to imagine. Rock art found throughout the Central Sahara preserves remarkable scenes from that forgotten world. Hunters chase antelope through tall grass. Families herd cattle beside flowing rivers. Boats drift across enormous lakes that no longer exist. These images are not myths. They are eyewitness accounts carved into stone by people who watched the Green Sahara with their own eyes. As the climate gradually changed, everything changed with it. Rainfall decreased. Lakes began shrinking. Grasslands slowly disappeared. Communities faced a difficult choice: adapt, migrate, or vanish. Many historians believe enormous waves of migration eventually flowed toward the Nile Valley, where predictable flooding continued supporting agriculture long after the Sahara became dry. Could the mysterious mummy belong to one of those forgotten peoples? Or did its culture survive independently, hidden deep within regions modern archaeologists have barely explored? The burial itself offered another remarkable clue. Tiny fragments of woven plant fibers were recovered beneath the body. Under powerful microscopes, specialists determined they came from reeds that grow only near freshwater environments. That single discovery transformed the investigation. Freshwater reeds had no business existing in the middle of today's Sahara, unless the environment had once been completely different. Nearby soil samples strengthened the argument. Ancient pollen grains preserved beneath layers of sediment revealed species of grasses, flowering plants, and trees that require regular rainfall. Charcoal fragments suggested controlled fires rather than natural wildfires. Even microscopic shells belonging to freshwater organisms appeared inside the surrounding soil. The desert had once been alive, and someone had chosen this exact location for a reason. As excavations continued, researchers uncovered another unexpected feature beneath the ceremonial stone circle: a narrow stone passage. Unlike natural cracks in bedrock, its walls had been deliberately shaped using stone tools. The entrance descended at a gentle angle before disappearing into complete darkness. Cool air drifted upward from below. That alone was unusual. Surface temperatures exceeded 45 degrees Celsius, yet the passage felt surprisingly cold. Flashlights revealed smooth walls coated with mineral deposits formed over thousands of years. No one knew how deep the tunnel extended, or what waited at the end. Every major civilization leaves behind places of worship: temples, shrines, ceremonial chambers. Could this hidden passage lead toward one of them? Or had the builders intended something far more mysterious? Before anyone entered, engineers inspected the structure for stability, while archaeologists documented every visible mark along the walls. Then one researcher noticed something almost invisible beneath centuries of dust: a series of engraved symbols. They matched several of the strange markings found beside the mummy. But this time they formed a repeating sequence. Not random decoration, not isolated images. A pattern. Perhaps a message. Perhaps directions. Or perhaps the first surviving fragments of a written tradition completely unknown to history. If that proved true, the implications would be enormous, because civilizations are remembered through their writing. Without written records, entire cultures disappear into silence. But somewhere beneath the sands of the Sahara, hidden inside a forgotten underground passage, archaeologists were beginning to suspect that silence might finally be coming to an end. The narrow passage seemed almost reluctant to reveal its secrets. Every step carried the archaeologists farther away from the scorching desert above and deeper into a world that had not seen human eyes for thousands of years. Their footsteps echoed softly against the stone walls, while fine dust drifted through the beams of their lights like tiny ghosts suspended in the darkness. The temperature continued to fall. At first glance, the surrounding landscape looked like nothing more than endless dunes, broken by scattered rocks. There were no towering ruins, no weathered temples, no pyramids rising above the horizon. It seemed impossible that such an extraordinary burial could exist in a place that appeared completely empty. But archaeologists have learned one important lesson over the last century. The most important discoveries rarely begin with spectacular monuments. They begin with tiny details that everyone else overlooks. The excavation expanded beyond the burial pit, and almost immediately, the desert began revealing another secret. Just a few meters from the mummy, researchers uncovered a circle of carefully positioned stones. Their arrangement was too precise to be natural. Each rock had been deliberately placed, forming what appeared to be a ceremonial boundary around the burial site. Similar stone circles have been found across parts of North Africa, but this one was unusually complex. Narrow pathways connected smaller circles to a larger central formation, almost like a map whose meaning had been forgotten thousands of years ago. As more sand was removed, additional features appeared. Flat stone platforms emerged beneath the surface. Fragments of carved pillars lay broken where they had collapsed ages ago. Ash deposits suggested that fires had once burned here repeatedly, perhaps during ceremonies that continued for generations. Whatever this place had been, it was never meant to be an ordinary grave. One archaeologist quietly described the site as a landscape built for memory rather than for the living. The deeper the excavation continued, the stranger the evidence became. Scattered among the stone structures were hundreds of animal bones. But these were not random leftovers from ancient meals. Many belonged to carefully selected species. Gazelles, desert cattle, birds, and even the remains of large predators had been placed in specific locations around the complex. Some skeletons were complete. Others had only skulls. Several appeared to have been intentionally painted with red mineral pigments that still clung faintly to the bone after thousands of years. Red ochre was no ordinary decoration. Across many prehistoric cultures, it symbolized blood, life, rebirth, and the mysterious boundary between existence and death. Long before organized religions developed, people across Africa, Europe, and Asia buried their dead with red pigment, believing it somehow connected them to another world. The Sahara burial seemed to follow a similar tradition. Yet no one could explain why its rituals differed so dramatically from every known Egyptian practice. Laboratory teams soon arrived with equipment capable of examining details invisible to the naked eye. Using portable scanners, they searched beneath the surrounding ground without disturbing untouched areas. The results surprised everyone. Beneath the visible excavation lay dozens of buried anomalies. Some resembled additional graves. Others appeared to be walls extending far beneath the dunes. A few formed straight lines stretching hundreds of meters before disappearing beneath untouched sand. It became increasingly clear that the mummy had not been buried alone. It had been part of something much larger. Satellite imagery was reviewed once again, this time using multiple wavelengths capable of detecting subtle differences in soil density and buried stone. Patterns slowly emerged across the landscape. Ancient pathways, collapsed structures, circular enclosures, even what looked like dried river channels cutting through terrain that today received almost no rainfall. The discovery reminded researchers of something many people rarely realize. The Sahara has not always been a desert. Between roughly 11,000 and 5,000 years ago, much of North Africa experienced what scientists call the African Humid Period. Seasonal rains transformed the region into vast grasslands filled with lakes, rivers, forests, and wildlife. Crocodiles swam where sand dunes now stand. Hippos wandered through freshwater wetlands. Human communities flourished across landscapes that today seem impossible to imagine. Rock art found throughout the Central Sahara preserves remarkable scenes from that forgotten world. Hunters chase antelope through tall grass. Families herd cattle beside flowing rivers. Boats drift across enormous lakes that no longer exist. These images are not myths. They are eyewitness accounts carved into stone by people who watched the Green Sahara with their own eyes. As the climate gradually changed, everything changed with it. Rainfall decreased. Lakes began shrinking. Grasslands slowly disappeared. communities faced a difficult choice: adapt, migrate, or vanish. Many historians believe enormous waves of migration eventually flowed toward the Nile Valley, where predictable flooding continued supporting agriculture long after the Sahara became dry. Could the mysterious mummy belong to one of those forgotten peoples? Or did its culture survive independently, hidden deep within regions modern archaeologists have barely explored? The burial itself offered another remarkable clue. Tiny fragments of woven plant fibers were recovered beneath the body. Under powerful microscopes, specialists determined they came from reeds that grow only near freshwater environments. That single discovery transformed the investigation. Freshwater reeds had no business existing in the middle of today's Sahara, unless the environment had once been completely different. Nearby soil samples strengthened the argument. Ancient pollen grains preserved beneath layers of sediment revealed species of grasses, flowering plants, and trees that require regular rainfall. Charcoal fragments suggested controlled fires rather than natural wildfires. Even microscopic shells belonging to freshwater organisms appeared inside the surrounding soil. The desert had once been alive, and someone had chosen this exact location for a reason. As excavations continued, researchers uncovered another unexpected feature beneath the ceremonial stone circle: a narrow stone passage. Unlike natural cracks in bedrock, its walls had been deliberately shaped using stone tools. The entrance descended at a gentle angle before disappearing into complete darkness. Cool air drifted upward from below. That alone was unusual. Surface temperatures exceeded 45 degrees Celsius, yet the passage felt surprisingly cold. Flashlights revealed smooth walls coated with mineral deposits formed over thousands of years. No one knew how deep the tunnel extended, or what waited at the end. Every major civilization leaves behind places of worship: temples, shrines, ceremonial chambers. Could this hidden passage lead toward one of them? Or had the builders intended something far more mysterious? Before anyone entered, engineers inspected the structure for stability, while archaeologists documented every visible mark along the walls. Then, one researcher noticed something almost invisible beneath centuries of dust: a series of engraved symbols. They matched several of the strange markings found beside the mummy. But this time they formed a repeating sequence. Not random decoration, not isolated images. A pattern. Perhaps a message. Perhaps directions. Or perhaps the first surviving fragments of a written tradition completely unknown to history. If that proved true, the implications would be enormous, because civilizations are remembered through their writing. Without written records, entire cultures disappear into silence. But somewhere beneath the sands of the Sahara, hidden inside a forgotten underground passage, archaeologists were beginning to suspect that silence might finally be coming to an end. The narrow passage seemed almost reluctant to reveal its secrets. Every step carried the archaeologists farther away from the scorching desert above and deeper into a world that had not seen human eyes for thousands of years. Their footsteps echoed softly against the stone walls, while fine dust drifted through the beams of their lights like tiny ghosts suspended in the darkness. The temperature continued to fall. Outside, the Sahara was one of the hottest places on Earth. Down here, it felt strangely calm, almost protected, as though the underground chambers had created their own forgotten climate. No one spoke for several moments. It was not fear that filled the silence. It was respect. Every experienced archaeologist understands that once an untouched chamber is entered, history changes forever. The smallest footprint, the faintest breath, even the warmth of a human body begins altering an environment that may have remained perfectly sealed for thousands of years. The passage stretched farther than anyone expected. Its walls had not been carved carelessly. Whoever built it had shaped the stone with remarkable precision. Chisel marks remained visible in several places, their patterns suggesting organized craftsmanship rather than simple excavation. This was not a natural cave adapted for burial. It had been designed. The ceiling gradually widened until the corridor opened into a circular chamber unlike anything the team had anticipated. Massive stone pillars supported the roof, each decorated with deeply engraved geometric patterns. There were no images of pharaohs crushing enemies beneath their feet. No familiar hieroglyphic prayers. No colorful scenes of gods sailing across the heavens. Instead, every surface was covered with repeating symbols. Spirals, concentric circles, diamond-shaped patterns, rows of tiny stars. At first glance, they looked decorative, but the longer researchers studied them, the less random they appeared. Several symbols repeated with mathematical precision. Others formed sequences that curved around the pillars before disappearing into the walls. One archaeologist quietly suggested they resembled a system of communication rather than simple artwork. If he was right, this discovery could challenge one of archaeology's oldest assumptions. For generations, historians believed complex writing systems emerged independently in only a handful of early civilizations. Mesopotamia developed cuneiform. Egypt created hieroglyphs. The Indus Valley left behind undeciphered seals. China produced its earliest inscriptions centuries later. But what if another tradition had developed here? Not borrowed, not copied, entirely its own. The possibility was extraordinary. Yet extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. No one rushed to conclusions. Every symbol was photographed from multiple angles. Three-dimensional scans recorded every tiny groove before specialists even considered attempting an interpretation. Then another discovery shifted everyone's attention. The floor. Unlike ordinary burial chambers, the center of the room contained a perfectly circular stone platform raised slightly above the surrounding surface. Its edges were polished smooth through repeated use. Tiny channels had been carved into the stone, radiating outward like the spokes of a wheel. Dark stains remained inside several of the channels. At first, they looked like ordinary mineral deposits. Chemical testing would later reveal something far more intriguing. Traces of plant oils, burned resin, and microscopic particles of aromatic herbs. Whoever gathered here had not simply buried their dead. They had performed elaborate ceremonies. Nearby, fragments of beautifully crafted pottery lay scattered across the chamber. Unlike common household vessels, these containers had been decorated with remarkable care. Their surfaces displayed scenes unlike any previously documented in Saharan archaeology. Human figures stood beneath enormous stars. Animals surrounded circles that seemed to represent the sun. Lines connected the sky to the earth as though illustrating invisible pathways between both worlds. One vessel showed a group of people standing around a central figure wrapped in what appeared to be layers of cloth. The resemblance to the mysterious mummy was impossible to ignore. Could this artwork be illustrating the very ritual that had preserved the body? If so, the chamber was no longer just a burial site. It was a record, a visual account left behind by the people themselves. Hours passed as researchers carefully documented every object. Then someone noticed something unusual near the northern wall. A shallow recess had been carved directly into the stone. Inside rested several carefully arranged objects untouched by time. A necklace made from polished shells. Stone beads carved with astonishing precision. An obsidian blade whose edge remained remarkably sharp despite its incredible age. But one object immediately captured everyone's attention. A small disc carved from dark green stone. Its surface contained the same mysterious symbols found throughout the chamber. Yet, unlike the larger engravings, these symbols had been organized into neat circular bands, almost like a calendar, or perhaps a map. No one knew. The artifact was unlike anything stored in museum collections. Geologists identified the stone as originating hundreds of kilometers away, suggesting long-distance travel or trade networks that historians had never associated with prehistoric Saharan cultures. If people living here had exchanged materials across such vast distances, their society may have been far more sophisticated than anyone previously imagined. Outside the chamber, additional teams continued surveying the surrounding landscape. Ground-penetrating radar produced another surprise. The underground complex did not end beneath the ceremonial room. It extended far beyond it. Straight corridors branched outward beneath the desert in multiple directions. Some terminated in large rectangular spaces. Others curved toward anomalies that might represent additional chambers. The scale was astonishing. Researchers had expected an isolated burial. Instead, they were beginning to uncover an underground complex whose true size remained completely unknown. News of the discovery spread rapidly through the archaeological community. Experts from universities across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East requested access to the excavation. Specialists in ancient languages, geology, bioarchaeology, climate science, and remote sensing all recognized that this site could answer questions reaching far beyond the mystery of a single mummy. Yet one question continued overshadowing every discussion. Who built this place? Carbon dating offered only part of the answer. Preliminary analysis suggested that organic materials recovered from the chamber were significantly older than many famous monuments of ancient Egypt. If confirmed, the underground complex may have existed before the construction of the earliest pyramids, long before Giza rose above the desert, long before royal dynasties ruled along the Nile. Someone had already been gathering beneath the Sahara to perform ceremonies inside carefully constructed stone chambers. The implications were difficult to ignore. History often celebrates civilizations whose monuments survived above ground. But what about cultures whose greatest achievements were swallowed by shifting sands? How many stories had vanished simply because the desert had hidden them too well? Standing inside the silent chamber, surrounded by symbols no one could yet read, archaeologists found themselves facing an unsettling possibility. Perhaps the greatest lost civilization of North Africa had never truly disappeared. Perhaps it had simply been waiting beneath the Sahara, preserving its secrets in darkness until the modern world was finally ready to listen. The deeper archaeologists investigated the underground complex. The more they realized, they were no longer studying a single burial. They were standing inside what appeared to be the ceremonial heart of an entire forgotten community. Every newly uncovered chamber added another piece to a puzzle that refused to fit any known civilization. Nothing matched perfectly with ancient Egypt. It was different from the Nubian kingdoms. It showed little resemblance to prehistoric settlements found across Libya or Algeria. The site seemed to belong to a culture that had developed its own identity before fading completely from human memory. As excavation continued beyond the circular chamber, another passage emerged beneath centuries of compacted sand and fallen stone. Unlike the first corridor, this one was noticeably wider. Its walls had been polished until they reflected faint light from modern flashlights, creating the strange illusion that the tunnel itself was glowing. Every few meters, shallow niches had been carved into the walls. At first, they appeared empty, but closer inspection revealed tiny traces of black soot clinging to the stone. These had once held lamps. Thousands of years ago, long before electricity illuminated the world, people carrying small oil lamps had walked these very corridors. Their flickering flames would have cast dancing shadows across the engraved walls, making the mysterious symbols seem almost alive. It was impossible not to imagine what those ancient processions looked like. Silent figures dressed in ceremonial robes, the scent of burning resin filling the underground air, soft chants echoing through the stone passages, the slow rhythm of footsteps moving toward a destination considered sacred. No written records survived to describe these rituals, but the architecture itself seemed determined to tell the story. The corridor eventually opened into another chamber, larger than the first and almost perfectly rectangular. Unlike the ceremonial hall, this room contained rows of carefully constructed stone benches running along both sides. The arrangement reminded several researchers of places designed for gatherings rather than burials. If the first chamber represented ritual, this one may have represented instruction. Perhaps elders taught younger generations here. Perhaps priests explained ceremonies beneath the desert sky. Or perhaps leaders gathered to make decisions during times of crisis as the once green Sahara slowly transformed into the harsh wilderness we know today. Near the center of the chamber stood a massive stone table, unlike anything previously discovered at the site. Its surface was astonishingly smooth. Not naturally smooth, deliberately polished. Generations of repeated use had worn away even the smallest imperfections. Around its edges, shallow grooves formed an intricate geometric design. When laser scanners mapped the carvings, something remarkable appeared. The grooves aligned almost perfectly with the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. That immediately attracted the attention of archaeoastronomers. Throughout history, many ancient civilizations aligned temples, tombs, and ceremonial sites with celestial events. Egyptian pyramids, Stonehenge, the temples of Central America, and countless prehistoric monuments reveal humanity's fascination with the movements of the heavens. Could this forgotten culture have shared that same obsession? The possibility became even stronger after another discovery. Directly above the central stone table, the ceiling contained a narrow circular opening no wider than a human hand. At first, researchers assumed it was accidental damage, but detailed measurements told another story. The opening had been intentionally carved. Its angle was precise. Computer simulations suggested that during specific times of the year, sunlight would pass through the shaft and strike the exact center of the stone table below, only for a few minutes, twice each year. The chamber was functioning like a giant calendar. Long before mechanical clocks or written calendars existed, the builders had transformed architecture into a way of measuring time itself. The implications were extraordinary. Such precision required generations of careful observation. Someone had watched the sky for decades, perhaps centuries, before constructing this underground sanctuary. Whoever these people were, they understood far more about astronomy than anyone had expected. Nearby, another team uncovered dozens of carefully arranged stone discs stacked inside a recessed storage alcove. Each disc carried nearly identical symbols around its edges. Yet the center of every disc was different. Some displayed crescents. Others showed circles surrounded by radiating lines. Several depicted unfamiliar constellations impossible to recognize immediately. Astrophysicists later compared these carvings with reconstructed ancient night skies. Several patterns appeared to match star positions visible over North Africa thousands of years ago. If confirmed, the carvings represented one of the oldest astronomical records ever discovered in the region. But astronomy was only part of the mystery. Bioarchaeologists examining the original mummy began releasing preliminary findings. The skeleton belonged to an adult male between 40 and 50 years old. His bones showed surprisingly little evidence of heavy physical labor. Unlike farmers or builders whose joints reveal years of intense work, this individual appeared to have lived a relatively protected life. Yet, one detail immediately puzzled researchers: his teeth. They were worn down in an unusual pattern unlike anything commonly seen in ancient Egyptian remains. Microscopic examination suggested repeated contact with extremely fine mineral particles. Perhaps from grinding medicinal plants, perhaps from ritual substances, or perhaps from something entirely unknown. Even more surprising was the absence of major injuries or disease. No signs of violent death, no obvious infections, no broken bones. Nothing explained why this individual had received such an elaborate burial. Unless His importance had nothing to do with politics. Perhaps he had never been a king. Perhaps he had been something else entirely. A spiritual leader, a healer, an astronomer, or the guardian of knowledge that disappeared alongside his civilization. Then came one of the most unexpected discoveries of the entire expedition. Inside a small, sealed chamber adjoining the main hall, archaeologists uncovered dozens of carefully preserved baskets. Their woven fibers had survived because of the Sahara's incredibly dry climate. Within them rested thousands of tiny seeds. Botanists immediately recognized several familiar species: wild barley, ancient millet, medicinal herbs. But mixed among them were seeds unlike anything stored in modern scientific collections. Some belonged to extinct desert plants. Others appeared to represent species never before documented. The discovery transformed the excavation from an archaeological site into an environmental time capsule. These forgotten plants could reveal exactly what the Sahara looked like before desertification changed everything. Every laboratory wanted samples. Every specialist wanted answers. Because the seeds held more than botanical information. They preserved evidence of an entire ecosystem that no longer existed. As evening fell across the excavation camp, researchers gathered beneath the brilliant Saharan sky. Above them stretched countless stars. The same stars the builders of the underground sanctuary had studied thousands of years earlier. For a brief moment, the distance between past and present seemed to disappear. Modern scientists armed with satellites, lasers, and DNA sequencing found themselves asking the very same questions ancient people once asked while looking upward into the night. Who are we? Where did we come from? And what remains of us after time buries everything beneath the sand? Deep below their feet, the silent chambers still held countless unopened passages. And somewhere within that underground labyrinth, the greatest secret of the forgotten civilization was almost certainly still waiting to be discovered. The discoveries made so far were already enough to rewrite part of North African history. A naturally preserved mummy buried with unfamiliar rituals. Underground ceremonial chambers aligned with the stars. Symbols belonging to no recognized writing system. Seeds from plants that no longer existed in the modern Sahara. Yet experienced archaeologists knew one important truth. The most remarkable discoveries rarely come first. They come after weeks of careful excavation, when patience begins revealing details that excitement often misses. By the 5th week of the expedition, nearly every visible chamber had been documented. Researchers believed they had mapped most of the underground complex. The site was beginning to make sense. The ceremonial hall appeared to be the spiritual center. The rectangular chamber may have served as a gathering place. The storage rooms contained ritual objects and preserved plant remains. Then the laser scans revealed something impossible. A solid stone wall near the deepest chamber reflected the instruments differently from every other surface underground. At first, engineers suspected variations in the natural bedrock, but repeated scans produced the same result. There was empty space behind it. Not a narrow crack. Not a natural cave. An entire hidden chamber. The wall itself blended so perfectly with the surrounding stone that it was almost invisible. Whoever constructed it had intentionally concealed what lay beyond. Even after thousands of years, the disguise remained effective enough to fool the human eye. Carefully, conservation specialists examined every centimeter. They found no hinges, no handles, no obvious entrance. Only one tiny circular opening, barely large enough for a finger. It seemed almost symbolic rather than functional. Eventually, researchers noticed shallow grooves running vertically along both sides of the wall. Years of wind-blown dust had filled them completely. Once cleaned, the grooves suggested something remarkable. The wall had once moved. Not like a swinging door, it had been designed to slide. With extraordinary caution, engineers constructed temporary supports before attempting the first movement. Millimeter by millimeter, the massive stone shifted. A cold current of air escaped from the darkness beyond. No one had expected that. Sealed chambers usually trap stale, motionless air. This chamber was somehow breathing. As lights illuminated the interior, silence spread across the team. Unlike every room discovered before, this chamber had remained almost perfectly untouched. No signs of looting, no collapsed ceiling, no scattered debris. Everything stood exactly where ancient hands had left it. The room was smaller than the ceremonial hall, but far more elaborate. The walls had been polished until they resembled dark glass. Hundreds of engraved symbols covered every surface, arranged in long horizontal bands that wrapped around the chamber from floor to ceiling. This was different. The earlier carvings appeared decorative. These looked organized, structured, intentional. One linguist whispered the same thought that several others had already begun considering. If this isn't writing, it's the closest thing we've ever seen. No one celebrated. They understood how dangerous assumptions could become in archaeology. Repeated symbols alone do not prove a language, but the patterns were impossible to ignore. Certain signs appeared at regular intervals. Others always followed the same combinations. Several groups were separated by straight vertical lines, almost as though dividing sentences or ideas. If these markings truly represented a written system, they belonged to a culture previously absent from every history book. At the center of the chamber stood a single stone pedestal. Unlike the ceremonial platform in the previous room, this one supported an object still resting exactly where it had been placed thousands of years ago. A sealed stone chest. Its surface carried no gold, no precious jewels, no extravagant decoration, only simplicity. Yet the craftsmanship was astonishing. The lid fit so perfectly that centuries of desert dust had failed to penetrate the interior. Conservators immediately halted any attempt to open it. The chest would remain sealed until specialists could prepare a controlled laboratory environment. Even a sudden change in humidity might destroy fragile organic materials preserved inside. Speculation spread quickly through the scientific community. Could it contain ritual objects, ancient manuscripts, ceremonial clothing, or something no one had imagined? While preparations continued, another group focused on the mysterious symbols covering the walls. Artificial intelligence software compared thousands of engraved signs against databases containing every major ancient script: Egyptian hieroglyphs, Proto-Sinaitic, cuneiform, Libyan inscriptions, Berber symbols, even the undeciphered signs of the Indus Valley. Nothing matched. Some shapes shared distant similarities with known traditions, but the overall system appeared unique. That result was both thrilling and frustrating. Without bilingual inscriptions, decoding an unknown writing system is one of archaeology's greatest challenges. The famous Rosetta Stone unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs because it repeated the same text in 3 scripts. Here, no such key existed. Only silence. Meanwhile, bioarchaeologists returned to the mummy itself with new technology unavailable only a decade earlier. High-resolution CT scanning allowed researchers to examine the body layer by layer without disturbing a single fragment of preserved tissue. The scans revealed something no one expected. Tiny objects had been placed beneath the skin, not throughout the entire body, only at specific locations, near the wrists, the chest, the neck, and behind the skull. At first glance, they resembled ordinary stones. Closer imaging told a different story. Each object had been carefully shaped before burial. Some contained microscopic drilled holes. Others displayed faint engraved markings invisible from the outside. These were not random inclusions. They had been deliberately inserted during an elaborate funerary ritual. The discovery immediately sparked debate. Were they symbolic? Protective amulets? Medical treatments? Or part of a ceremony whose meaning had vanished thousands of years ago? One medical historian proposed another possibility. Throughout history, many cultures believed certain stones possessed healing or spiritual properties. Perhaps these objects were never intended for the dead. Perhaps they had been worn or carried throughout life before becoming part of the burial. The idea remained impossible to prove, yet it highlighted a growing realization. The people who buried this individual possessed traditions far more sophisticated than researchers had first imagined. Outside, another surprise emerged from the surrounding desert. Ground-penetrating radar began identifying dozens of similar underground anomalies scattered across several kilometers. Most remained buried beneath enormous dunes. Some were connected by faint linear features resembling ancient roads. Others appeared completely isolated. If even a fraction proved to be additional ceremonial sites, this was no isolated settlement. It was an entire hidden landscape, a network, perhaps even a city swallowed by thousands of years of shifting sand. For generations, explorers crossed the Sahara, believing its greatest mysteries had already been found. Now, the desert itself seemed to whisper a different story. Not everything had been lost. Some civilizations had simply disappeared beneath the dunes so completely that history forgot where to look. And somewhere beyond the excavated chambers, beyond the hidden passageways and silent stone walls, another sealed structure waited beneath the sand. If the first hidden chamber had preserved a forgotten language, what could the next one still be hiding? The discovery of the hidden chamber transformed the expedition from an important excavation into one of the most closely watched archaeological investigations in the world. News spread rapidly through universities, museums, and research institutes. Specialists in ancient languages, climate science, genetics, and remote sensing arrived from every corner of the globe, each hoping to help solve a mystery that seemed to grow larger with every passing day. Yet despite the growing attention, the desert remained silent. The wind continued to sweep across the dunes, as though nothing extraordinary had happened beneath them. Every morning, fresh sand-covered footprints made the day before, reminding everyone that the Sahara had been hiding its secrets long before modern civilization existed. Inside the excavation, work became even more meticulous. Every grain of soil was carefully sifted. Every fragment of charcoal was catalogued. Every stone was photographed before being moved. The team understood that context was everything. A beautiful artifact without its original position could lose half its scientific value. The story of a civilization is often hidden not only in what is discovered, but in exactly where it is found. Attention soon returned to the sealed stone chest resting at the center of the hidden chamber. Weeks of preparation had finally made it possible to examine the object under controlled conditions. Conservators stabilized the surrounding environment, carefully matching the chamber's temperature and humidity to prevent sudden deterioration of anything preserved inside. The lid was heavier than expected. It took several people working together to lift it only a few centimeters. No one rushed. Even after thousands of years, the smallest mistake could destroy priceless evidence forever. As the gap widened, lights illuminated the interior. There was no glittering treasure, no piles of gold, no royal jewelry. Instead, the chest contained something archaeologists often value even more: knowledge. Carefully arranged inside were dozens of thin stone tablets stacked with astonishing precision. Each tablet had been polished smooth before being engraved with the same mysterious symbols covering the chamber walls. Unlike the large inscriptions, however, these carvings were far more detailed. Some tablets contained only a few repeating signs. Others displayed long sequences arranged into neat horizontal rows. Several included small engraved illustrations beside the symbols. Human figures, stars, flowing water, plants, animals. The relationship between the images and the symbols immediately attracted linguists. Ancient writing systems often evolved from pictures into increasingly abstract signs. Could these tablets preserve different stages of that transformation? No one could say with certainty. But for the first time, researchers possessed enough material to begin searching for recurring grammatical patterns rather than isolated symbols. One sequence appeared again and again beside carvings of flowing water. Another repeatedly accompanied images of the rising sun. A third always appeared near human figures with raised hands. The tablets seemed less like random decoration and more like carefully recorded information. Perhaps prayers. Perhaps historical records. Perhaps instructions for ceremonies performed within the underground sanctuary. If these inscriptions could ever be deciphered, they might reveal the names of people who had been forgotten for thousands of years. While linguists focused on the tablets, another team made an equally important breakthrough. Advanced DNA sequencing finally produced usable genetic material from the mysterious mummy. Recovering ancient DNA in hot climates is notoriously difficult. Heat destroys genetic material over time, making successful analysis extremely rare. Yet the exceptional preservation inside the underground chamber had protected enough fragments for scientists to begin comparisons. The results surprised everyone. The individuals shared ancestry with ancient populations from North Africa, but the genetic profile also contained markers associated with groups living much farther south during the same period. This suggested something historians had long suspected but rarely proved. The Sahara had not been a barrier. It had been a bridge. Long before deserts became nearly impossible to cross, rivers and grasslands connected communities across enormous distances. People exchanged ideas, technologies, beliefs, and families throughout a landscape that no longer existed. The mysterious civilization may have stood at the crossroads of those connections. Not isolated, connected. Trade offered another clue. Chemical analysis of the obsidian blade recovered from the hidden chamber revealed that the volcanic glass originated hundreds of kilometers away. Similar testing of decorative shells found near the mummy traced them to an ancient coastline now far beyond the excavation site. Neither material could have reached the settlement by accident. Someone had carried them. Perhaps traders, perhaps pilgrims. Perhaps entire caravans moving across a green Sahara long before shifting climates changed everything. The discovery challenged one of archaeology's oldest misconceptions. Modern maps often make ancient societies appear separated by vast, empty spaces. But landscapes change. Thousands of years ago, what is now endless sand may have contained rivers serving as natural highways. Communities that seem impossibly distant today could once have been close neighbors connected through regular travel. As evening approached, survey teams expanded their work several kilometers beyond the main excavation. Using drones equipped with thermal imaging, they searched for subtle temperature differences beneath the dunes. Buried stone retains heat differently than loose sand. The technology revealed dozens of faint geometric shapes invisible from ground level. Some resembled circular enclosures similar to the original site. Others formed long rectangular outlines unlike anything excavated so far. Then one image captured everyone's attention. Nearly 2 kilometers east of the main excavation appeared a perfect ring nearly 100 meters across. At its center stood a single buried structure. Its shape was unmistakably artificial. Even beneath layers of sand, the geometry was too precise to be natural. The new anomaly dwarfed everything discovered so far. If the underground sanctuary represented a ceremonial center, what was hidden beneath the enormous circular complex? Engineers estimated that excavating such a site could take years, perhaps even decades. Yet no one doubted its importance. the desert was revealing a pattern. Not one burial, not one sanctuary. An entire civilization. One whose architecture, rituals, astronomy, and symbols continued defying every expectation. Late that night, long after most of the camp had fallen asleep, a small group of researchers climbed a nearby ridge overlooking the excavation. Above them stretched one of the clearest night skies on Earth. The Milky Way arched across the heavens exactly as it had thousands of years earlier. One astronomer quietly compared the stars above with the engraved constellations recovered from the stone tablets. Several matched with astonishing accuracy. The realization sent a chill through the group. The people who built the underground sanctuary had not simply observed the sky. They had understood it, perhaps far better than anyone had imagined. And if the stars guided their ceremonies, then somewhere beneath the Sahara, there might still be another chamber aligned with the heavens, waiting for the exact moment when sunlight, moonlight, or the stars themselves would reveal the final secret that its builders intended the future to find. The discovery of the massive circular structure changed everything. Until now, archaeologists had believed they were uncovering a ceremonial complex built around a single extraordinary burial. But the drone surveys suggested something far more ambitious. Buried beneath nearly 30 feet of compacted sand lay a monument several times larger than the underground sanctuary. From above, its nearly perfect ring stood out against the natural landscape with mathematical precision, something nature almost never creates on its own. The problem was obvious. Excavating a structure of that size by traditional methods could take years. The Sahara was constantly moving. Every strong wind pushed fresh sand into the trenches, forcing researchers to uncover the same ground again and again. Heavy machinery was out of the question. Penetrating radar swept across the entire circle, sending electromagnetic waves deep beneath the desert floor. Layer by layer, the invisible world below began to emerge on computer screens. The results left the scientists speechless. The circular monument was not solid. It surrounded an enormous open courtyard. Radiating outward from that courtyard were 12 narrow corridors, each extending like the spokes of a wheel toward the outer ring. At the end of every corridor appeared a separate chamber, almost perfectly identical in size. 12 chambers, 12 pathways, 12 carefully planned divisions. The number immediately caught the attention of archaeologists who specialized in ancient cosmology. Across countless civilizations, 12 appears again and again. 12 lunar cycles in a year, 12 major constellations crossing the night sky, 12 seasonal divisions recognized by many ancient cultures. Coincidence? Perhaps. But archaeologists rarely ignore repeating patterns. As excavations slowly exposed the outer wall, another remarkable feature appeared. Unlike the underground sanctuary, this monument had once stood above ground. Its exterior was built from enormous blocks of sandstone, carefully shaped to fit together without mortar. Time, wind, and centuries of erosion had reduced the visible structure to little more than buried fragments, but enough survived to reconstruct its original appearance. It must have been magnificent. Imagine travelers crossing the Green Sahara thousands of years ago, long before endless dunes dominated the landscape. Far across the horizon, they would have seen an immense circular monument rising above the plains like a sacred landmark. Perhaps it guided caravans. Perhaps it welcomed pilgrims. Or perhaps it marked the center of a civilization that believed this place connected heaven and earth. As workers cleared the entrance corridor, they noticed something unusual beneath the sand. Hundreds of tiny white fragments. At first glance, they resembled ordinary stones. Closer inspection revealed a far more disturbing truth. They were bone. Human bone. Not complete skeletons. Fragments. Thousands of them, carefully scattered across the entrance passage. The discovery immediately halted excavation. Every fragment was mapped before being collected. Forensic anthropologists soon determined that the bones belonged to multiple individuals of different ages: men, women, children. Yet there were no signs of violence, no cut marks, no crushing injuries, no evidence of warfare. Instead, many bones displayed traces of deliberate burning. Not enough to destroy them, just enough to alter their color. The pattern suggested ritual cremation rather than accidental fire. This raised an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps entering the monument required participants to pass through the remains of their ancestors, not as an act of horror, but as an act of remembrance. Many ancient cultures believed the dead continued guiding the living. Walking through the ashes of previous generations may have symbolized entering sacred space under their protection. Beyond the entrance, another surprise waited. The central courtyard contained no roof. Instead, it opened directly toward the sky. Even after thousands of years, sunlight poured into the center exactly as its builders intended. The floor had been paved with massive stone slabs arranged in concentric circles. Each ring contained engraved symbols unlike those found inside the underground sanctuary. These carvings were much larger, visible from great distances. Several resembled celestial bodies. Others appeared to depict flowing rivers branching across the landscape. One enormous engraving stretched nearly 20 feet across the courtyard. At first, researchers thought it represented an abstract design. Then, satellite specialists overlaid the pattern onto reconstructed maps of the ancient Green Sahara. The similarities were astonishing. The carving closely resembled the network of rivers and lakes that once crossed North Africa during the African humid period. If the interpretation proved correct, these people had created one of the oldest known maps of their environment, not merely artistic decoration, geographical knowledge preserved in stone. Nearby, geoarchaeologists made another unexpected discovery. Tiny sediment samples trapped between the paving stones contained microscopic remains of freshwater algae. These organisms can survive only in permanent bodies of water. Their presence confirmed what climate scientists had suspected for decades. When this monument was built, water flowed nearby. Perhaps a river, perhaps a lake. Whatever its source, the civilization that constructed this place had flourished in a landscape almost impossible to imagine today. Meanwhile, epigraphers continued studying the engraved symbols recovered from the hidden chamber. A breakthrough finally emerged. One particular sequence appeared repeatedly beside images of the sun rising above a curved horizon. Another appeared only beside scenes showing human figures gathered together. Statistical analysis suggested the repeated signs functioned like titles or names. No one could yet read them. But patterns were beginning to appear. The mysterious symbols behaved less like artwork and more like structured language. Then came an even stranger discovery. Inside one of the 12 outer chambers rested dozens of polished stone spheres. Each was almost exactly the same size. Each had been carefully shaped by human hands. When researchers measured them, they noticed something remarkable. The spheres differed in weight by only a few grams. Such precision was extraordinary for prehistoric stoneworking. Why produce so many nearly identical spheres? No one knew. Some suggested they were ceremonial objects. Others believed they served as measuring standards. A few proposed they represented planets or stars used during astronomical rituals. Whatever their purpose, they demonstrated a level of craftsmanship far beyond what many historians expected from early Saharan societies. As sunset approached, golden light flooded the open courtyard. One young archaeologist happened to glance toward the western wall. For a brief moment, a narrow beam of sunlight passed through a tiny opening in the stone. The beam struck a single engraved symbol near the center of the courtyard. Only that symbol. Nothing else. Within minutes, the light disappeared. The team checked their instruments. The alignment had not happened by accident. The builders had calculated the position of the setting sun with astonishing accuracy. On a specific day each year, the monument itself became part of the ceremony. Stone, light, time, all working together exactly as intended thousands of years ago. Standing silently beneath the fading sky, the researchers realized something profound. They were no longer searching for isolated artifacts. They were uncovering the surviving fragments of an entire worldview. A civilization that watched the heavens, measured the seasons, honored its ancestors, and left behind monuments designed to speak across millennia. And somewhere beyond the 12 silent chambers, beneath dunes that had hidden their secrets for countless generations, the greatest mystery of all still remained untouched. The annual alignment of sunlight was no longer just an intriguing observation. It became the turning point that forced archaeologists to reconsider everything they believed about the mysterious civilization beneath the Sahara. The precision was simply too extraordinary to dismiss as coincidence. Someone had calculated the movement of the sun with remarkable accuracy, then transformed that knowledge into architecture capable of functioning thousands of years later. But one question refused to go away. Why? Ancient societies rarely built monuments simply because they could. Every stone required enormous effort. Every block transported across the landscape represented countless hours of labor. Civilizations invested that energy only when a structure served an essential purpose. Whatever this monument represented, it had mattered enough for an entire community to dedicate years, perhaps generations, to its construction. The following morning, the excavation focused on one of the remaining unopened chambers surrounding the great circular courtyard. Unlike the others, its entrance had collapsed long ago beneath a massive slab of sandstone. Removing it required extraordinary care. Engineers installed temporary supports while conservators monitored every vibration. Even a small collapse could destroy fragile evidence preserved inside. When the final stones were cleared away, cool air drifted from the darkness beyond. The chamber had remained sealed for thousands of years. Its silence felt almost untouched. Flashlights slowly illuminated the interior. Instead of statues or ceremonial platforms, the room contained rows of carefully carved shelves built directly into the walls. Hundreds of objects still rested exactly where they had been placed. Not weapons, not jewelry, not treasure. Books, or at least the ancient equivalent of them. Dozens of smooth stone tablets stood upright in carefully organized rows. Some were no larger than a human hand. Others stretched nearly 2 feet across. Every surface had been engraved with astonishing precision. This was no random collection. It looked like an archive. One archaeologist quietly compared it to walking into a library that had been locked before the pyramids were even imagined. Each tablet displayed a combination of mysterious symbols and finely carved illustrations. Some showed unfamiliar plants growing beside rivers. Others depicted animals that had disappeared from the Sahara thousands of years ago. Elephants, hippos, crocodiles, tall grass reaching above human height. For climate scientists, these carvings were more than artwork. They were eyewitness accounts. Together with pollen samples, fossilized seeds, and ancient lake sediments, they confirmed that the builders had lived in a world almost impossible to recognize today. The Green Sahara was no myth. It had been their home. As specialists documented the tablets, another detail began attracting attention. Several carvings appeared repeatedly. A large circular object surrounded by smaller stars. A winding river flowing toward a mountain. A group of people raising their hands toward the sky. At first, the scenes seemed unrelated. Then computer software overlaid dozens of images together. Patterns emerged. The illustrations appeared to follow a sequence. Not isolated pictures. A story. No one could read the accompanying symbols, but the artwork itself seemed to narrate events. Perhaps a migration. Perhaps the founding of a settlement. Perhaps the memory of a catastrophe. Meanwhile, geologists working outside the monument made a discovery that would dramatically reshape the investigation. Using deep sediment cores extracted several kilometers away, they identified a distinct layer of volcanic ash buried beneath the dunes. Laboratory analysis traced the ash to a massive eruption that had occurred thousands of years earlier, somewhere beyond the Sahara. The eruption itself had not destroyed the civilization, but it provided an exact chronological marker. Everything above the ash layer was younger. Everything below it was older. For the first time, archaeologists could estimate when the mysterious society had flourished with far greater precision. The results were astonishing. The underground sanctuary and circular monument appeared to predate many of Egypt's earliest dynasties. If confirmed, this civilization had already developed sophisticated architecture, astronomy, and ritual traditions, while organized kingdoms along the Nile were only beginning to emerge. The implications spread rapidly throughout the academic world. For generations, history books described ancient North Africa through the rise of Egypt. Now, evidence suggested another sophisticated society may have existed alongside it, following an entirely different path of cultural development. That possibility excited some scholars. It also made others cautious. Extraordinary discoveries require careful verification. Every conclusion had to survive intense scientific scrutiny. As debate continued, bioarchaeologists returned to the original mummy with another objective: stable isotope analysis. Tiny chemical signatures locked inside human teeth and bones can reveal remarkable details about a person's life: where they grew up, what they ate, even whether they migrated during childhood. Weeks later, the laboratory results arrived. The individual's diet differed significantly from that of ancient Egyptians living along the Nile. Instead of relying primarily on river agriculture, this person had consumed a wide variety of wild plants, freshwater fish, grazing animals, and seasonal foods consistent with wetlands rather than desert environments. The chemistry matched the green Sahara. The mummy had not been brought here from elsewhere. He had lived here. He belonged to this vanished landscape. Yet one result puzzled researchers even more. Chemical signatures inside his teeth indicated that during childhood, he had spent several years in a region hundreds of kilometers away. He had traveled, or his family had. Long-distance movement appeared to be normal rather than exceptional. This reinforced another growing theory. The civilization hidden beneath the Sahara was never isolated. It participated in networks stretching across ancient Africa. Ideas, people, materials, knowledge. Everything moved far more freely than historians once imagined. Late one afternoon, while documenting the archive chamber, a conservator noticed something almost invisible beneath one of the largest stone tablets. A narrow gap. Carefully lifting the tablet revealed a shallow compartment carved directly into the floor. Inside rested a bundle wrapped in layers of dried plant fibers. Unlike the mummy, these fibers had become incredibly fragile. The slightest pressure threatened to reduce them to dust. Conservation specialists immediately stabilized the package before attempting to unfold it. Layer after layer was carefully separated. Finally, hidden at the center, lay a single polished object unlike anything previously discovered. A crystal disc, completely transparent, perfectly circular. Its surface carried microscopic engravings visible only under magnification. When laser light passed through the disc, dozens of tiny symbols projected onto the chamber wall. The room fell silent. No one had ever seen anything like it. It was not magic. It was engineering. Someone living thousands of years ago had intentionally created an optical device capable of revealing information hidden within the crystal itself. The builders had expected future eyes to discover it, but only under the right conditions. As projected symbols shimmered across the ancient stone, researchers realized they were standing on the edge of an even greater mystery. Because if one hidden message had survived inside a crystal for thousands of years, how many more secrets had this forgotten civilization concealed beneath the endless sands of the Sahara, waiting patiently for the moment when humanity would finally learn how to see them? The crystal disk became the centerpiece of the entire expedition almost overnight. Until that moment, every discovery had raised difficult questions, but still fit within the boundaries of archaeology. The underground chambers, the ceremonial monuments, the mysterious symbols, and the carefully preserved mummy all pointed toward an advanced culture lost beneath the Sahara. But the transparent disk seemed different. It suggested a level of craftsmanship that demanded far closer examination before anyone dared draw conclusions. The object measured just under 6 inches across and was remarkably thin, almost delicate in appearance. Under ordinary light, it looked like nothing more than a polished circle of exceptionally clear quartz. Yet when researchers examined it through high-powered microscopes, they discovered that both surfaces had been engraved with thousands of microscopic grooves. These grooves were no accident. Each had been cut with extraordinary precision. The patterns followed mathematical curves so regular that some researchers initially questioned whether modern contamination had somehow occurred. Repeated testing ruled that out. The disk was genuinely ancient. Materials scientists soon identified the crystal as high-purity quartz, likely obtained from a distant mountain region hundreds of miles away. Transporting such a fragile object across prehistoric landscapes would have required enormous care. Whoever made it clearly considered it valuable. But why? That question became even more fascinating after optical engineers joined the investigation. Using carefully controlled laser beams, they projected light through different parts of the crystal. Each angle produced a slightly different image upon a nearby screen. At first, the projections appeared random. Tiny dots, curved lines, scattered geometric shapes. Then someone slowly rotated the disk. The separate fragments aligned. A complete pattern emerged. It was unmistakably intentional. The projected image resembled a vast network of interconnected circles linked by straight pathways. At the center stood one much larger circle surrounded by 12 smaller ones. The room immediately fell silent. Everyone recognized the design. It matched the circular monument uncovered beneath the Sahara. Not perfectly, but closely enough to leave little doubt. The crystal appeared to represent the site itself. If true, it was more than an artistic object. It was a map. And maps are rarely created for places that lack importance. Researchers overlaid the projected pattern onto modern satellite imagery of the excavation. The correspondence was astonishing. Several circles matched already excavated chambers. Others pointed toward locations still buried beneath untouched dunes. The crystal was showing them where to dig next. Within days, excavation began at one of the unexplored locations indicated by the projection. Unlike previous trenches, this one revealed something unexpected almost immediately. Massive stone blocks arranged in a perfect rectangle. Not underground, above ground. The building had once stood proudly beneath the open sky before collapsing and disappearing beneath centuries of shifting sand. Careful excavation revealed wide entrance steps leading toward an enormous doorway. Unlike the ceremonial sanctuary, this structure emphasized openness rather than secrecy. Its walls contained very few engraved symbols. Instead, they displayed life-sized carvings of ordinary people. Fishermen casting nets into rivers, families harvesting tall grasses, children gathering fruit beneath trees, craftsmen shaping stone tools. There were no oversized kings, no triumphant conquerors, no scenes of warfare. The message seemed remarkably different from many ancient monuments elsewhere in the world. Rather than glorifying rulers, these builders celebrated everyday life. It offered a rare glimpse into how this forgotten society may have viewed itself. The deeper archaeologists explored the building, the stronger that impression became. Rooms lined with storage jars suggested communal food reserves. Large stone grinding platforms indicated collective grain processing. Evidence of workshops appeared throughout the structure. It looked less like a royal palace and more like the center of a thriving community. One room contained dozens of unfinished stone carvings abandoned exactly where artisans had left them. Their tools still rested nearby. Small hammerstones, polishing stones, bone carving implements. It felt as though the craftsmen had simply walked away and never returned. That haunting realization raised another question. What had happened here? Civilizations do not simply disappear overnight. They decline gradually, or they leave evidence behind. Disease, conflict, famine, environmental collapse. Something had forced these people to abandon a place that generations had carefully built. Climate scientists believed they already knew part of the answer. The Green Sahara had slowly vanished as rainfall patterns shifted over thousands of years. Lakes shrank. Grasslands disappeared. Animals migrated. Communities depending upon fresh water faced impossible choices: move, adapt, or perish. Yet the archaeological evidence suggested remarkable resilience. Instead of sudden collapse, the settlement appeared to evolve over centuries. Buildings were modified, passageways expanded, storage facilities increased. People adapted again and again, until adaptation was no longer enough. Then another clue emerged from one of the storage rooms. Buried beneath layers of collapsed roofing lay dozens of woven baskets remarkably preserved by the dry environment. Inside rested hundreds of carefully selected stones. Not gemstones. Ordinary pebbles. At least they seemed ordinary. Closer inspection revealed tiny engraved marks on every single one. No two were identical. Some carried circles. Others displayed stars. Several showed flowing lines resembling rivers. Statistical analysis revealed something fascinating. The symbols corresponded closely with those appearing throughout the underground sanctuary. The pebbles may have served as counting tokens, or teaching tools, perhaps even an early administrative system. Long before written documents became common elsewhere, these people may have developed their own method of organizing information using portable symbolic objects. The idea remained speculative. Yet another discovery strengthened the possibility. Near the building's entrance, archaeologists uncovered a stone slab covered with shallow depressions arranged in neat rows. When the engraved pebbles were placed inside, they fit almost perfectly. The arrangement resembled an ancient game, or perhaps a calculation board. No one could be certain. But once again, the evidence pointed toward organized thought, planning, and sophisticated social structure. As evening approached, the excavation paused while researchers reviewed the day's findings. The forgotten civilization beneath the Sahara no longer appeared mysterious simply because of a strange mummy. It was becoming mysterious because every discovery challenged long-held assumptions about early human societies. They understood astronomy. They built monumental architecture. They preserved knowledge. They organized communities. They traveled across enormous distances. And somehow, despite all of that, history forgot them. Standing beside the newly uncovered building, one archaeologist quietly looked across the endless dunes stretching toward the horizon. So much of this desert still hasn't been explored. The words lingered in the evening air. Because if one settlement had remained hidden for thousands of years beneath shifting sand, how many more were still out there? How many forgotten cities, temples, burial grounds, and archives continued sleeping beneath the Sahara, waiting for the wind to uncover them one grain of sand at a time? The discovery of the community building answered one important question. The people beneath the Sahara had not been wandering tribes passing through an empty landscape. They had built permanent settlements, organized public spaces, preserved knowledge, and planned for future generations. But it also raised an even greater mystery. If this civilization was so advanced, where were its dead? Apart from the single unusual mummy that had started the entire investigation, no large cemetery had been found. For a society that clearly invested enormous effort into architecture and ritual, the absence of a formal burial ground seemed almost impossible. Ancient civilizations always leave traces of how they honored the dead. Egypt built pyramids and rock-cut tombs. The Nubians raised burial mounds. The people of the Mediterranean carved elaborate necropolises into hillsides. Even prehistoric communities marked sacred ground where generations were laid to rest. Yet here, beneath one of the largest archaeological discoveries in North Africa, the dead seemed almost completely absent. The question haunted every member of the expedition. Then, almost by accident, the desert offered another clue. One afternoon, while clearing loose sand from the northern edge of the circular monument, a field technician noticed something unusual. A narrow crack had opened in the ground after several days of unusually strong desert winds. At first it appeared to be an ordinary fracture caused by shifting sand, but cool air drifted upward from the opening. It was the same phenomenon the team had encountered when they first discovered the underground sanctuary. There was empty space below. Ground-penetrating radar quickly confirmed their suspicions. Beneath the crack lay an enormous underground chamber, nearly twice the size of the ceremonial hall discovered earlier. Unlike the previous structures, however, this one had no obvious entrance. It had been completely sealed. Engineers spent several days stabilizing the surrounding rock before carefully widening the opening just enough for a remote robotic camera. The small machine disappeared into the darkness. Everyone watched the live video feed in complete silence. Its lights slowly swept across smooth stone walls. Dust floated undisturbed through the air. Nothing had entered this chamber for thousands of years. Then the camera turned. Rows. Endless rows. Stone platforms stretched into the darkness. Upon each platform rested a carefully wrapped human form. Not one mummy. Not 10. Hundreds. The control tent fell silent. The camera continued moving deeper. Every body had been placed with extraordinary precision. Their heads all faced the same direction. Their hands rested in nearly identical positions. No signs of panic. No evidence of mass death. This had been a carefully planned resting place. The lost cemetery had finally been found. Unlike Egyptian royal burials, these individuals were not enclosed in ornate coffins. Instead, each body had been wrapped in woven reed textiles coated with a dark, resin-like substance that had hardened over time. The dry underground environment had preserved many of the wrappings almost perfectly. Some still retained traces of painted designs. Others displayed carefully stitched geometric patterns unlike anything known from neighboring civilizations. Conservators immediately suspended physical excavation. The chamber represented one of the largest undisturbed prehistoric burial sites ever discovered in the Sahara. Every movement had to be documented with extraordinary precision. Laser scanners created complete three-dimensional maps before a single mummy was touched. As imaging progressed, another remarkable detail emerged. Not every burial was identical. The majority followed the same ritual arrangement, but several individuals occupied larger stone platforms positioned near the center of the chamber. Their wrappings were noticeably more elaborate. Decorated shell necklaces rested around their necks. Stone staffs lay beside their bodies. Small carved crystal objects had been carefully placed upon their chests. Perhaps these were community leaders, perhaps spiritual guides, or perhaps the guardians of knowledge preserved throughout the underground complex. Then bioarchaeologists noticed something unexpected. Children rested beside adults. Entire family groups appeared to have been buried together. Unlike many royal cemeteries focused on elite rulers, this burial chamber seemed to represent an entire community. Generations had remained together. even in death. The discovery painted a very different picture of this forgotten society. Power may have existed, but family seemed equally important. Nearby, chemical analysis of the resin coating produced another surprise. Rather than relying on the same embalming substances used by ancient Egyptians, these people had created their own preservation mixture using local tree resins, aromatic herbs, plant oils, and naturally occurring desert minerals. It worked remarkably well. Several bodies retained skin, hair, and even fragments of woven clothing. This was not accidental preservation. It was intentional. They had mastered their own form of mummification. Independent, distinct, entirely their own tradition. The implications spread rapidly through the scientific community. For centuries, Egyptian mummification had been viewed as one of the world's most remarkable funerary achievements. Now, evidence suggested another sophisticated preservation practice had developed elsewhere in North Africa, shaped by different beliefs but achieving similarly extraordinary results. As work continued, one burial attracted particular attention. Unlike every other individual, this mummy rested inside a circular stone enclosure decorated with engraved stars. No jewelry accompanied the body. No ceremonial staff. Only a smooth black stone placed gently between folded hands. The wrapping itself differed as well. Instead of geometric stitching, countless tiny symbols had been embroidered directly into the fabric using dark plant fibers. The symbols matched those covering the sanctuary walls. Researchers immediately realized they were looking at someone extraordinary. Perhaps a priest, perhaps a scholar, perhaps the very person responsible for preserving the civilization's knowledge. High-resolution imaging revealed another astonishing detail. Beneath the mummy's head rested a folded bundle, not cloth. Thin sheets of treated plant material layered together. If preserved well enough, they might contain the first portable written records ever recovered from the site. No one dared move them. Not yet. The slightest mistake could reduce them to dust. Instead, conservators began designing specialized techniques capable of lifting the fragile materials intact. The process might take months, perhaps longer. Patience had become the expedition's greatest tool. That evening, the burial chamber remained sealed while environmental systems monitored temperature, humidity, and air quality. No unnecessary risks would be taken. Outside, darkness settled across the Sahara. The stars slowly filled the sky above the silent dunes. Thousands of years earlier, the people resting beneath the sand had looked upon those same constellations. They had mapped them, measured them, built monuments aligned with them, and finally entrusted their dead beneath them. The expedition had begun with a single mysterious mummy. Now it had uncovered an entire civilization that honored its ancestors with astonishing care. Yet one question still refused to disappear. If these people had gone to such extraordinary lengths to preserve their dead, what message had they hoped the future would one day uncover? And hidden somewhere among hundreds of silent mummies, that answer was still waiting. The discovery of the underground cemetery marked a turning point unlike anything the expedition had experienced before. Until now, every chamber had raised questions about architecture, astronomy, and ritual. But the cemetery introduced something far more personal. These were no longer anonymous builders represented only by monuments and symbols. They were real people, families, children, elders, craftsmen, storytellers, individuals who had lived their lives beneath a green Sahara before the desert claimed everything they knew. For the first time, archaeologists felt as though they were standing inside the memory of an entire civilization. Every burial told a silent story. Some individuals rested with carefully carved stone tools placed beside folded hands. Others carried necklaces fashioned from shells transported from distant coastlines. Several children had been buried with tiny carved animal figurines polished smooth through years of handling before they were placed inside the tomb. These were not treasures. They were keepsakes, objects that had mattered during life. The realization transformed the atmosphere inside the chamber. Researchers stopped referring to the bodies by excavation numbers alone. Each burial became an individual deserving the same respect given to any modern cemetery. Meanwhile, conservators prepared for one of the most delicate operations of the entire expedition: the folded bundle discovered beneath the specially wrapped mummy's head. Weeks of environmental stabilization had finally reduced the risk of damage enough for the first examination. The bundle rested inside a protective chamber where humidity and temperature matched the ancient environment as closely as possible. Every movement was recorded, every layer photographed. The outer wrapping consisted of woven reeds coated with a thin layer of hardened resin. Beneath it appeared several sheets of remarkably thin plant fiber pressed together with natural adhesives. It was not paper, not parchment, not papyrus. It represented an entirely different writing material. Microscopic examination revealed fibers from aquatic plants that once grew abundantly across the ancient wetlands of the Green Sahara. The civilization had developed its own medium for preserving information. Carefully separating the first sheet revealed faint brown markings. At first they looked like stains. Then enhanced imaging brought hidden details into view. Rows of familiar symbols. Not engraved this time, painted. Delicate mineral pigments had survived thousands of years in astonishing condition. Excitement spread quietly through the laboratory. Unlike stone carvings limited by space, these painted sheets contained long, uninterrupted sequences of symbols. This was exactly the kind of material linguists had hoped to find. Entire passages, repeated structures, possible grammatical patterns. No one could read a single sentence. Yet, artificial intelligence systems began comparing every painted sign with the engraved inscriptions recovered from the sanctuary. The software detected hundreds of repeated combinations. Certain symbols consistently appeared at the beginning of sections. Others always occurred near illustrations of rivers, stars, or human figures. One recurring sequence appeared more frequently than any other. Researchers cautiously suggested it might represent the civilization's own name. If true, history had nearly recovered the first word spoken by a people forgotten for millennia. Elsewhere in the cemetery, physical anthropologists continued studying the human remains. The results painted a fascinating portrait of daily life. Most adults showed strong muscles developed through regular activity rather than exhausting labor. Their bones revealed little evidence of chronic violence. Serious injuries were surprisingly rare. Healed fractures suggested that injured individuals often survived long enough to recover, implying community care rather than abandonment. Dental analysis revealed a varied diet rich in freshwater fish, grains, wild fruits, edible roots, and grazing animals. Signs of prolonged starvation appeared uncommon. This had not been a struggling society barely surviving in a hostile desert. It had flourished during an age when the Sahara itself was alive. Then came another remarkable discovery. Several skulls displayed tiny circular openings created with astonishing surgical precision. Trepanation, one of humanity's oldest known medical procedures. Ancient healers carefully removed small sections of skull, possibly to relieve pressure after injury or treat neurological conditions. The astonishing part was not the operation itself. It was the evidence of healing. New bone had grown around the openings. Many patients survived for years afterward. The forgotten civilization possessed surprisingly advanced medical knowledge. Medicinal plants recovered from storage baskets suddenly gained new significance. Perhaps they were not merely ceremonial offerings. Perhaps they formed part of a sophisticated healing tradition. Nearby, chemical residue inside several pottery vessels supported that possibility. Scientists identified compounds consistent with natural antiseptic resins, aromatic herbs, and pain-relieving plant extracts. Knowledge passed through generations. Knowledge now buried beneath thousands of years of sand. Outside the excavation, climate researchers reconstructed the environmental history of the region using sediment cores collected from ancient lakebeds. Their findings revealed a gradual tragedy unfolding over centuries. Rainfall slowly declined. Seasonal rivers became unreliable. Large lakes fragmented into isolated pools. Grasslands retreated. The landscape did not die suddenly. It weakened little by little. Generation after generation watched familiar water sources disappear. Each decade demanded new adaptations. Each century forced communities farther from their ancestral homes. Perhaps the civilization did not collapse through war. Perhaps it slowly surrendered to the changing climate. The thought felt strangely familiar. Modern humanity understands environmental change better than any civilization before it. Yet standing inside the underground cemetery, surrounded by the preserved remains of people who had faced similar challenges thousands of years earlier, the past suddenly felt uncomfortably close. Then, during evening analysis of the painted sheets, one linguist noticed something extraordinary. Several symbols appeared beside tiny drawings of stars arranged in recognizable patterns. Astronomers compared the illustrations with reconstructed night skies visible over North Africa thousands of years ago. The match was remarkable. One sequence corresponded to the rising of Sirius. Another aligned with Orion. A third appeared linked to seasonal changes marked by the appearance of specific constellations. The painted document was not simply recording stories. It was preserving astronomical observations, perhaps even a calendar. Combined with the solar alignments already documented inside the monument, a new picture emerged. These people organized their lives according to the heavens. Planting, harvesting, ceremonies, travel. Everything may have been guided by the sky. Late that night, long after most researchers had returned to camp, the lead archaeologist remained inside the cemetery. Rows of silent mummies stretched into the darkness beyond the reach of his flashlight. Each represented a life once filled with hopes, fears, families, and dreams. Each belonged to a civilization erased not by conquest, but by time. He looked upward toward the narrow shaft where faint starlight filtered into the chamber. For thousands of years, those same stars had watched over the sleeping dead. Now, after an eternity of silence, they were watching history awaken once again. And hidden somewhere within the painted records, one final revelation still waited. A revelation that might explain not only who these forgotten people were, but why they chose to disappear beneath the sands instead of allowing their civilization to fade without a trace. For months, the expedition had uncovered one astonishing discovery after another. A mysterious mummy, unlike any previously found in the Sahara. Hidden ceremonial chambers buried beneath shifting dunes. A circular monument aligned with the movements of the sun. An underground cemetery preserving hundreds of individuals. Painted manuscripts written in an unknown script. Every discovery expanded the mystery instead of solving it. But now, something extraordinary was finally beginning to emerge. Not from another buried chamber, not from another artifact, but from the writing itself. Using thousands of photographs, laser scans, and artificial intelligence trained to recognize repeating linguistic structures, researchers slowly organized the mysterious symbols into recognizable patterns. No one claimed they had deciphered the language completely. That would take years, perhaps decades. Yet several breakthroughs became impossible to ignore. Certain groups of symbols always appeared together. Others consistently marked the beginning or end of long passages. Some behaved exactly like names. Others resembled dates or ceremonial markers. Most fascinating of all, one sequence appeared beside nearly every illustration showing rivers, lakes, and rainfall. Climate scientists and linguists began comparing their findings. Could this sequence represent water itself? The possibility seemed increasingly likely. If true, the civilization's surviving records were deeply connected to the changing environment around them. The painted manuscripts were not merely religious texts. They were documenting a landscape. One beautifully preserved illustration captured particular attention. It showed people standing beside an enormous body of water, while birds circled overhead. Fish swam beneath boats carved with remarkable detail. Children gathered reeds along the shoreline, while distant hills rose beneath a sky filled with carefully arranged stars. To modernize, the image looked almost impossible. Nothing resembling that landscape exists anywhere near the excavation today. Yet geological evidence confirmed it once had. The illustration represented memory, a world that had vanished. As translators continued comparing recurring symbols, another pattern emerged. The manuscripts seemed to describe movement. Entire communities traveling together. Animals being led across open grasslands. Boats crossing wide rivers. Groups gathering at what appeared to be seasonal meeting places. Historians had long debated how people adapted as the Green Sahara slowly disappeared. Now these records hinted at an answer. Migration was not chaos. It was organized, planned, perhaps even expected. Generation after generation adjusted to the changing climate while preserving traditions that reached back centuries. Nearby, analysis of animal remains uncovered another important clue. The settlement had not depended upon a single food source. Researchers identified bones belonging to fish, antelope, wild cattle, gazelle, water birds, turtles, and even crocodiles. Plant remains revealed grains, edible grasses, fruits, nuts, and aquatic vegetation. This remarkable diversity explained how the community survived environmental changes for so long. They adapted continuously. Flexibility became their greatest strength, until eventually, even adaptation reached its limits. Then came one of the most emotional discoveries of the expedition. While examining family burials inside the underground cemetery, archaeologists noticed something unusual about several children. Tiny footprints, pressed into soft clay before it hardened thousands of years earlier. The footprints appeared on small ceremonial vessels buried beside the children. Some belonged to infants, others to toddlers just beginning to walk. No elaborate decoration, no royal symbols, only the simple imprint of little feet, perhaps made by parents before burial, perhaps intended to preserve the memory of a child forever. The discovery affected everyone present. For a brief moment, the immense distance separating modern researchers from this forgotten civilization disappeared. Love, grief, family. Those emotions had not changed. Thousands of years could bury cities, but they could not erase humanity itself. Outside the excavation, another survey team continued exploring distant anomalies identified by satellite imagery. Several miles beyond the main site, they located faint traces of ancient shorelines surrounding what had once been an enormous freshwater lake. Scattered along its edges appeared clusters of stone circles remarkably similar to the ceremonial complex already excavated. The implications were breathtaking. The newly discovered settlement had not stood alone. It belonged to a much larger network extending across the ancient Green Sahara. Perhaps dozens of communities, perhaps hundreds, all connected by rivers that no longer existed, trade routes that had become seas of sand, histories erased by climate rather than conquest. Meanwhile, engineers studying the crystal projection disk made another remarkable observation. Under specific wavelengths of light invisible to the human eye, additional microscopic engravings appeared within the quartz itself. The disk contained multiple layers of information, each revealed only under carefully controlled conditions. It functioned almost like an ancient optical archive. The builders had deliberately hidden knowledge beneath knowledge. The sophistication of the craftsmanship astonished experts. Creating such microscopic engravings without modern equipment required extraordinary patience and technical ability. Far from being primitive, these people demonstrated an understanding of optics, geometry, and precision that historians were only beginning to appreciate. Then, one evening, astronomers gathered once more inside the Great Circular Monument. The calendar predicted the arrival of another important celestial event. As darkness settled across the Sahara, thousands of stars emerged above the silent ruins. Researchers waited. Minutes passed. Then, exactly as predicted, brilliant starlight entered through a narrow opening high within the monument's outer wall. The beam crossed the courtyard. It illuminated a single engraved stone that had remained hidden in shadow throughout the year. As the light reached its center, dozens of carved symbols suddenly became visible. They had been almost impossible to notice under ordinary daylight. The monument itself had protected the inscription until the precise night chosen by its builders thousands of years earlier. No one spoke. The moment felt less like archaeology and more like a conversation across time. Someone had designed this place, knowing future generations might one day stand exactly where the researchers now stood. Someone had trusted that the stars would never fail. And they had been right. Long after kingdoms had risen and fallen. Long after rivers had vanished. Long after the green Sahara became one of Earth's greatest deserts. The heavens still kept their appointment. Standing beneath that ancient beam of starlight, the expedition finally understood something profound. The greatest achievement of this forgotten civilization was not simply its monuments, nor its astronomy, nor its mysterious methods of preservation. Its greatest achievement was ensuring that even after thousands of years of silence, its story could still find a way to reach the future. And somewhere beyond the final unexplored dunes, the last chapter of that story was still waiting to be uncovered. For nearly a year, the Sahara had continued giving up secrets that many historians once believed had been lost forever. Every expedition usually reaches a point where discoveries begin slowing down. Artifacts become smaller. New evidence grows increasingly rare. Researchers spend more time analyzing than excavating. This expedition never seemed to reach that point. Each answer uncovered an even larger mystery. By now, scientists no longer questioned whether an advanced society had once flourished in this part of North Africa. The evidence had become overwhelming. Carefully planned architecture, astronomical alignments, sophisticated preservation techniques, organized settlements, written records, and an entire underground cemetery all pointed toward a civilization that had adapted brilliantly to a landscape that no longer existed. But one question still remained unanswered. Why had they gone to such extraordinary lengths to preserve their knowledge? The crystal disk, the hidden chambers, the sealed archives, the carefully protected manuscripts. None of it looked accidental. It almost seemed as though they expected someone to find them. The answer may have begun with one final survey. Using satellite imagery combined with high-resolution ground-penetrating radar, researchers expanded their search far beyond the original excavation. The computer models stitched together thousands of individual scans into one enormous three-dimensional map of the ancient landscape. As the digital terrain slowly assembled on the screen, a remarkable pattern appeared. The monuments were not scattered randomly. Every ceremonial complex, every buried structure, every underground chamber followed a deliberate arrangement stretching across dozens of miles. From ground level, nothing unusual could be recognized. From above, however, the pattern became unmistakable. The settlements traced the course of an ancient river system that had vanished thousands of years ago. Every major monument stood beside what had once been flowing water. Every cemetery occupied slightly higher ground, protected from seasonal flooding. Every community building overlooked fertile wetlands that no longer existed. The civilization had built itself around water, not simply because people need water to survive, because water shaped everything they believed. The painted manuscripts suddenly made much more sense. The repeated symbols thought to represent rivers now appeared throughout nearly every major inscription. The disappearance of water had not merely transformed the environment. It had transformed their entire world. Climate historians compared the archaeological evidence with reconstructed rainfall data covering thousands of years. The pattern was unmistakable. Generation after generation watched the lakes shrink. The rivers narrowed. Grasslands retreated. Animals migrated elsewhere. The people adapted repeatedly, until adaptation was no longer possible. Yet surprisingly, there was almost no evidence of panic. No hurried fortifications. No mass graves caused by famine. No widespread destruction through warfare. Instead, the archaeological layers revealed remarkable organization. Buildings were carefully abandoned. Valuable objects intentionally stored. Archives protected. Burials completed with extraordinary dignity. It looked less like collapse and more like preparation. Preparation for leaving. One afternoon, conservators finally completed the stabilization of the fragile plant fiber manuscripts recovered beneath the ceremonial mummy. Several additional pages could now be examined safely. Among hundreds of mysterious symbols appeared one of the clearest illustrations yet discovered. It showed a long procession of people walking beneath the stars. Families carried baskets. Children rode upon the backs of animals. Elders walked together holding carved staffs. Behind them stood a great circular monument remarkably similar to the one uncovered beneath the Sahara. Ahead stretched mountains beneath falling rain. The illustration felt deeply emotional. Not a battle, not a victory, a farewell. Perhaps the builders had documented their final migration. Perhaps these manuscripts preserved the memory of an entire people leaving the homeland they could no longer sustain. Nearby, archaeologists uncovered another touching detail inside the underground cemetery. Many burial wrappings contained tiny packets sewn discreetly into the linen. Inside rested carefully selected seeds, dozens of different species, wild grasses, flowering plants, edible herbs, medicinal shrubs. Botanists examined them carefully. Several belonged to plants that no longer grow naturally anywhere near the excavation. The seeds had been placed intentionally, perhaps as offerings, perhaps as symbols of rebirth, or perhaps something even more practical. Ancient travelers often carried seeds when moving into unfamiliar lands. They represented hope, the possibility of beginning again. If that interpretation proved correct, then even in death these people carried reminders of the living landscape they had lost. Meanwhile, geneticists completed one of the largest DNA comparisons ever attempted using remains from the cemetery. The results were remarkable. The population displayed considerable genetic diversity. People from multiple regions had joined together over generations. This had not been an isolated society hidden from the outside world. It had welcomed newcomers, shared knowledge, formed families across great distances. Trade routes through the Green Sahara had connected far more people than historians once imagined. The forgotten civilization had been a crossroads, not an endpoint. Late one evening, while reviewing digital scans of the circular monument, a graduate student noticed something everyone else had overlooked. Tiny carved dots surrounded several major inscriptions, too regular to be natural, too small to notice with the naked eye. Computer enhancement revealed they formed repeating numerical sequences. Mathematicians were invited to examine them. After several days of analysis, one researcher made an astonishing observation. The numbers closely matched astronomical cycles, solar years, lunar months, planetary movements. The builders had embedded mathematical relationships directly into the monument itself. Stone had become a scientific instrument. Every alignment, every measurement, every shadow, everything served multiple purposes at once. Ceremony, education, observation, memory. Standing within the monument, future generations could literally watch time passing across carefully positioned stones. It was architecture functioning as a calendar, observatory, and sacred space simultaneously. As the expedition entered its final weeks, journalists from around the world gathered outside the excavation. Headlines spoke of lost civilizations, hidden kingdoms, forgotten mummies, ancient mysteries. The public naturally searched for dramatic conclusions, but the archaeologists understood something very different. Real history is rarely about sudden revelations. It is built patiently, one careful discovery after another, one measured conclusion replacing old assumptions, one fragment helping complete a picture that remains forever unfinished. Standing atop a nearby ridge at sunset, the expedition leader looked across the endless dunes glowing gold beneath the fading light. Somewhere beneath that seemingly empty desert still rested countless untold stories. Entire communities, unknown languages, forgotten lives. The Sahara had hidden them for thousands of years. Now, little by little, it was allowing humanity to remember. And perhaps the greatest lesson left behind by this vanished civilization was not simply that they once existed. It was that no matter how completely history appears buried, the truth has an extraordinary way of surviving, patiently waiting for the moment when someone is finally ready to uncover it. The first discovery was only supposed to be another archaeological excavation, a routine investigation beneath the endless sands of the Sahara. Researchers expected to recover a few pottery fragments, perhaps the remains of a forgotten settlement, maybe another weathered burial. Instead, they uncovered a mystery that forced historians to question everything they thought they knew about one of the world's greatest deserts. It all began with a single bizarre mummy. Unlike the carefully embalmed rulers of ancient Egypt, this individual rested inside a hidden chamber unlike anything previously documented in the region. The unusual burial position, mysterious symbols, extraordinary preservation, and carefully constructed underground sanctuary hinted at something far greater than an isolated grave. Then came the discoveries no one could have predicted. The circular monument aligned with the movements of the sun. The underground chambers connected through astonishing architectural precision. The crystal disc that projected hidden patterns invisible to the naked eye. The vast cemetery preserving hundreds of people who had once called the Green Sahara home. The painted manuscripts written in a language the modern world still cannot fully understand. Every excavation transformed the story. Every layer of sand revealed another forgotten chapter. By the end of the expedition, the question had changed completely. Researchers were no longer asking whether an advanced civilization had once existed beneath the Sahara. They were asking how many more remained hidden, because this story is larger than one mummy, larger than one burial, larger than one archaeological site. Modern satellite surveys reveal thousands of unexplored anomalies scattered across North Africa. Beneath dunes stretching farther than the eye can see lie ancient river channels, buried lake shores, abandoned settlements, forgotten cemeteries, and structures that have never been excavated. The Sahara is often described as empty. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is one of the largest archaeological archives on Earth. It simply happens to be covered by millions of tons of sand. For thousands of years, shifting dunes acted like nature's protective blanket. Cities disappeared. Roads vanished. Entire civilizations slipped beyond memory. Yet the desert never truly destroyed them. It merely concealed them. Ironically, the same harsh environment that erased these communities from history also preserved many of their greatest achievements. Dry air slowed decay. Sealed chambers protected fragile artifacts. Stable underground temperatures preserved organic materials that would have disappeared almost anywhere else. The desert became both destroyer and guardian. That strange contradiction makes archaeology in the Sahara unlike anywhere else on Earth. Every expedition carries the possibility of rewriting history. And history has already changed many times before. For generations, scholars believed the Sahara had always been an unforgiving wilderness separating civilizations. Today, climate science tells a very different story. Thousands of years ago, enormous lakes reflected the sky across northern Africa. Powerful rivers crossed fertile grasslands. Elephants, giraffes, hippos, crocodiles, and countless other animals flourished where only dunes exist today. Human communities adapted, traded, traveled, observed the stars, developed complex beliefs, and built monuments whose full purpose we are only beginning to understand. The forgotten people beneath the Sahara were not living at the edge of civilization. They were part of civilization, perhaps one of its earliest chapters. Their disappearance reminds us of another important truth. No civilization lasts forever. Empires rise. Empires fall. Languages evolve. Cities flourish. Cities disappear. Even the greatest monuments eventually surrender to time. Yet ideas survive. Knowledge survives. Curiosity survives. The builders of those underground sanctuaries may never have imagined satellites orbiting Earth. They could never have predicted laser scanners, DNA sequencing, artificial intelligence, or ground-penetrating radar. But perhaps they understood something even more important. Someone, someday, would return. Someone would ask questions. Someone would refuse to let the past remain silent forever. Perhaps that is why they preserved their dead with such extraordinary care. Why they aligned monuments with eternal stars. Why they engraved symbols into stone. Why they protected fragile manuscripts inside hidden chambers. Not because they expected to be remembered immediately, but because they believed memory itself deserved protecting. Across history, countless discoveries have reminded us how incomplete our understanding truly is. Göbekli Tepe challenged assumptions about the origins of monumental architecture. The Dead Sea Scrolls transformed our understanding of ancient religious history. The Terracotta Army revealed an entire underground empire standing silently beneath China for more than 2,000 years. Every generation believes it knows most of the story. Every generation is eventually humbled by the next discovery. Perhaps the Sahara will provide that discovery again. Somewhere beneath those endless dunes, another sealed chamber may still wait. Another forgotten library. Another untouched cemetery. Another monument aligned with stars that have never stopped moving overhead. Perhaps another civilization entirely. The strange mummy that first captured the world's attention may ultimately become only a footnote in a far greater story still waiting to be written. That is the true beauty of archaeology. It is not about proving ancient legends. It is not about chasing myths. It is about listening carefully to evidence left behind by real people whose voices have nearly disappeared beneath the weight of time. Every artifact is a sentence. Every monument is a chapter. Every excavation is another page in humanity's unfinished history. And no matter how advanced we become, the past continues reminding us that there are still countless things we do not know. Perhaps that is exactly how it should be. Because mysteries inspire exploration. Questions drive discovery. Curiosity pushes civilization forward just as surely as it did thousands of years ago. The people who once walked beside rivers flowing through the green Sahara are gone. Their homes have vanished. Their language remains silent. Their names have been carried away by the wind. Yet somehow, across thousands of years, across unimaginable changes in climate, across the rise and fall of kingdoms, their story survived, not in books, not in legends, but beneath the sand itself, waiting, patiently, for humanity to become curious enough to uncover it. So the next time you look across an endless desert, remember this. What appears empty today may be hiding the greatest story ever forgotten. And somewhere beneath those silent dunes, the next incredible discovery may already be waiting for the first brushstroke that finally brings history back into the light. Until that day comes, the Sahara will continue guarding its greatest secrets, one grain of sand at a time.